All right. We start with the Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus they hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Masavaja mountain in Rajgiri, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the fine perfection of wisdom, shall move upon like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element in sound object, including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance in sound object, including no aging and death, no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on the divine perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration, without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate para gate para samgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and their surrounding in their entirety along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrated the gathering of the kinis in the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of fusing space by a powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation. Look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Chashara Samaya Penakasachara. Akasama Chashara Samaya Pe. Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Para Samgate Bodhisoha. But the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified. Shintu Koriye Soha. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified, and may be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here and right now. Sashi Puki Junshi Meto Tahamri Ramli Shi ni de tien badi sangye shindu mi te owa Hiroku namda shin la chupa shoidam guru rana mandala kaniyataya
Sanji Chetan
so
Soji Chonula
chancho
Chancho
badu
Bardo
dani
Dani
kapsun
Kyabsun Dagi
dagi
Chushi
chishigi
Jibin
betsonu
Tsonu Jim
dola
Rolam Ben
penche
Sanji
sanje
Drupara
doka
Sho Sanji
Changa
Chetan Soji
tsoki
Chonula
chonala
Chancho
chancho
Bardo
bardu
Dani
dani
Kyabsun
kapsun
Dagi
dagi
Chushi
chishigi
Jibin Tsonu
betsonu
Jim
dola
Rolam Ben
penche
Sanji
sanje
Drupara
doka
Sho Sanji Chetan
Changa tsoki
Soji
chonala
Chonula Chancho
chancho
Bardo
bardu
Dani
dani kapsun
Kyabsun
dagi chishigi
Jibin Sonam Jin
dola
Rolam Benje
penche
Sanjin
sanje
Drupara
doka
Sho Kanki Tuzinye Sonne Tawa Tamche Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Denze Kodam Chela Changze Lo Good morning everyone. Antanda Anzo Geshe Sherevla Ani Kontus Yungu Yorsech Danguni Kosung Sira Tenza One that Lobham Kikuach Kansana Tachi Konda Kondrevigi Ani Gegi Zambalin the Nala Hajang Kombu Tindras Ra Tenza the Tsu Jigla Chik Pigi Ani Kutsela Parche Mayon ya Ani Gansu Ani Mulong Jaguati Pigi Kansa Gerg Nedun Samayimba and Sanji Tembi Nedun to Yabati Nguyu Nisuri Sira.
Geshe had yesterday the news about Geshe Sherab, who has visited Chimrezik Institute a few times and also is one of the teachers in the FMT organizations. He came down with COVID-19 and his situation seems to be a little bit serious. So Geshe got disheartened. When we look at teachers of the Dharma, Geshe Sherab is in a special, you can say, situation is quite special, and there are not many Geshes or teachers in that situation where they can also teach the Dharma in a particular way in English and so forth. So when we then make prayers and aspirations for the sake of people who are affected by COVID-19, of course, we make them in general, but also here we also make it in a really specific way, not just in a general way, but in a specific way, because someone like him can also offer service to the Buddhist teachings in a very particular way.
Dirida Gen Korandovena and Chik Susu Gergichan Shebana, one the Tanegi Tamsik Chik Churo Gedu Chikba Ra and Dindiris on the Gen Rumbuchi Bana and again Koran Pe and the Sikwa Chimbu Young Tindi Gen Koran Chitangi Pigi any Nyom Chong Ra Pigi Chik Kaya Pe and the Tajibu Mugonge and it Chabe Yabu. Ditolaya and Chiki Yabu. Kanjin Zambali Kawa Drobainaya and Raya may be Giginch Ting it tas Shumoyon is Tindichayores. Tinza Dizu and in Koranzo Kawa Pebainaya Shubainare Pebainare Zawani Nanda Yomares. Inaya Manzuta Tuzun Didichlaya Zambalin the Nalaya Go Nijingi and meeting the Chagi Yavanza. 인지민이 간주 아니 말함자와나 간주 담식 싸마지연자 땡땡 아니 고제 발시 모용이야 아니 땡땡 팬도용 그래서 진짜 아니 same thing이 아니 넘버 2 말함자로 치스 아니 간주 냠부 되니다 지 소소저나 비기 야채야 탐바 아니 레버준 로커사디 아니 고무 차주바 치기스 라 아니 니만 따버디 아니 춘주된 거요 안주 냠도 아니 고무 차주비 춘주디 아니 살숨지 아니 게실라 꾸지샤베 땡약체도 라 안땡고스
Geshe said is not only a Dhamma friend, but also someone that has pure Samayak. They have the same teacher, and he's known to be very humble and also very scholastic. He was a good scholar, a good student, and is not someone that kind of does things in a very kind of extensive and elaborate way. Actually, he keeps things quite simple. He was very good in teaching the Dhamma, not only in Tibetan, but also in English. So in that sense, you can say that wherever he is, wherever he stays, he has no problems in being able to give teachings and offer service to the Dhamma. So we need people like that. We need teachers like that. And for us to have also pure samaya and pure pledges between ourselves and Geshe, it's good to make prayers to keep him in our aspiration. May he be able to recover swiftly. So for that end, Geshe says that he, in his personal practice, but also we can also do it in a personal practice, we can set aspirations for Geshe Sherab may be able to overcome this obstacle quickly. And Geshe says that since he also does a Mahakala practice, asking the enlightened activities of the protectors, he will also include Geshe Sherab in his practice. It's actually good to do it 3 times for the sake of Geshe Sherab.
내가 좀 미유송야 지금부터 Geshe Sherab 비기 쪼올샤 네 아니 대단 잡에 단다 디기 직 아니 나서 디기 Tony Kangan trading it, Messiah Mambuyeros, and to Samalogi Chet and Yindas Ra.
And in saying such prayers, of course, we might focus mainly on Geshe Sherab, take him as the principal, but also keep in mind that there are millions who are affected by COVID-19 all around the world. So we also include them in our focal object and when we make such aspirations. Shall we do the Mahakala recitation now? 6 Mahakalas. Sorry. Page 284. Should we do it in Tibetan or English? All right, Chuki, you have the stage.
Jerizela Chan Zelo Shabdu Tangjin Banaya Kane Nabu Chambo Dagi Shantarjin Chadru Ji Namba Yeba Chugu Barian Chenwanzin Dama Drama Run Chadun Dro Yomba Toba Danan Donzis Teji Sheba Zonin Chewaji Tabishan Chewa Nombos Chansam Travi or Trajan Dumbara Trevor Sandurai Leverage Cho Major Javi Gentle the Tanza Mongong of Jutosers Rinchen Togum Gaye Ola Jin Shenle John the Dorman Lenze Bandin Chadu Bala Chanze Sanji Temba Nimbo Sowanda Kunjom Bonimbo Tobat Daja Bonlong Kwada Jenum Ji Jengen Parchi Tamji Shewat Chindong Runyudu Saduso Homanin Zela Chan Zelo Shadu Tanjim Pana Yagan Nabo Chambo Dagi Shandojin Chadu Ji Namba Yeba Drugu Barian Chenwanzin Tamanja Marun the Chadun Yomba Toba Dan Donzisum Dejin Shaba Sonin Chewa Chewa Nombozi Jansum Travi or Trajendum Bar Trevor Sandurai Lever Chu Majo Jave Jandal Tanza Mongong of Juto Sergin Rinchen Togong Ayola Shenli John the Doma Lenzibi Bandin Chadu Bala Chanze de Sanje Temba Nimbo Sowan Kunjo Ombo Nimbo Dovada Daja Bolong Kodan Chenom Kengen Parche Tamji Shevada Chindong Runyu Dusa Duso Homanin Zela Chance Shabdu Tanjin Bana Yagane Nabo Chambo Dagi Shandu 차주 주지 genje 남바진 예바 주고 버윈 자원 타만자마르는 자돈 주 영바 토바다는 동지 대신 셰바 존은 제와지 잡이제는 제와 농부 장섬 잡이고 자견돈 바래 저러 선도라이 레버 주 머지 제외견도 창점 몽공갑주 도설진 린전 도공가여라 신의 존의 도만len 제비 반대 차주 발라찬 산제 덴바님부 소와다 군종보님부 떠바 다자본론 과단 제능지 쟁에 발제 담제시와 진동우정년도 자두소 라몽공보에 메라 다는 그비자순 다소 성장 담제지 니모말르사월 공보라마에 메라 다는 그비자순 자 담제지 발제말르사월 쇼 다기 삼비도단의 대신시비전도 취지인지도 대놈 간다 삼바군 대다 담제지를 토바 매번 종교르지. Thank you. 여기까지 참지. 멤비 내려와 숨바 멤비 내려 흘 람반네 멤비 내 흘람반네 드레사다 다네 땡긴 타마터 대놈 꼴라 꼬르키 근데 견진 란신 디 로리온디 찜메데 디온디 찜네 장가점시 테더키스.
Now let's go back to the text and pick up from the point that we left off yesterday. So today we're going to pick up from verse the last two lines, verse 163. First off, let's look at the outline and see where we are. So we're looking at the way to practice the application of this attitude in having exchanged oneself with others. Now, when we look at devoting oneself to taking the lower position for the sake of others, this is where we're going to pick up from today. We have covered the first 2 points, examining one's own faults and confessing wrongs one has done to others. Today, we're going to pick up from devoting oneself to taking the lower position. First off, let's read through verse 63 and verses 63 and 64. So just like the lowest of servants, I should employ myself for all purposes. I'm naturally fault reading. I should not praise myself for a portion of incidental good quality. I shall never let even a few people know of my good qualities, no matter how.
가서 당하서 대법 준비 취생디 대법 준비 취생인디 아니 지 심진 셴라야 아니 제위 장수치로 간지 셴 아니 비 초도 코리아기 삼로직 토니 숭구여 반자 다셴 초도 코라야 아니 수중아게디 아니 마르탄고야 간지 수중아게 좀 거야 인자 아니 ngaje pi panya gi tabya shu di pi mensa zongchin ro ani simjen tamji gi pi tachik chenyo gi nang gi tachik ani tamata gi ani dishi sonen jobayina ani kawala nugreslavna ngargelaya nugiyores ro ani kawala pengreslavna sosu gilaya ninji dan chanju semda tartuna sanji kombotoya gi ani di tonen jotugenza So
here when we take the lower position, we regard a Mahayana Dharma practice in which we develop a sense of care, loving concern for all sentient beings. This is what we nourish. This is what we sustain, a sense of loving care for all sentient beings. And then we take them to be this supreme or the best of the best, those that we work for. And in order to destroy pride, the best way to destroy pride is to adopt a lower position in which we consider ourselves to be servants of others, or the least of the servants working for the sake of others. So this type of technique is good for destroying pride, and also it contributes continuously to the progression along the path of development of loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta.
네, 아니, 때 망슈질이야, 지피기게 땀다 년자생이 들이야, 지 마창인직다 요마로 왔으라, 만주다 지 심전 담아왔다, 가다 라발이야, 지 땀다 년자라야 차지, 되니 생기 피기게 생라야, 안지 그버치 마투야, 생라야, 아니 땡아 땅 마투야가 소바, 간지 안 딘디 용구여러 왔어. 아니 식소술이야 때식 땡아 땅이 총바이나 쇼식배 아니 셀레게와 가지데라 소바 아니 디 토네 아니 나게게라 소바 연구여 반자 따지 때라 땅사기 차지 예메디 수수 토라야 상단으로 개와 통모면 단다 버도 검돼야디 차다모소리 아니 로디기 왕기 비 따지 릉하기 아니 저버 마르들이야 검돼요라스 따지 내가 비길이야 this leg beyond this yoban tin lorgi kenchin this yongare mondo tia shu chembuski yomaros o dinti songlo tambayina ani tende rangi juji ngargeleya ani ne tugiyores ro da disungdo da.
So mostly look at the things that we're attached to. In most cases, we're attached to reputation and social status and so forth. Really, when we look at the things we're attached to in this life, Geshe said that also with respect to himself, we want to have good reputation, we want to have a good social standing and so forth. So and through that, we sometimes not only do not praise others, but also we develop attitudes of disrespect towards others. If we get just a little bit of praise, we become inflated. We become proud. Since that without beginning, we have been accustomed to anger and attachment. And through that, we've developed habits of bad behavior. So any good quality that we might have now, even slightest, is you could say that it is adventitious. So as such, when you think about it, there's nothing to become so proud about.
어디래 베나 간다고 지키라 아니 까워파도 매봤다 지켜 토마 매봤니 다디기 깨 버도 아니 간도자 비기다 아니 참말로 찍번한 신진네 그 뉴무독섬라 콤 릉하기 좁어 말을 이래야 콤니 용대바 빼깨우 탐있는 게 타마치 차여러 왔어 이나야 디파라들이야 지금 로뉴스 사단질이야 페저로 때 민로즈 라운드 피 게시 민로즈 라운드 테니 나르기에 로 깨워 토모면 단다바도 피 아니 도리도서 제자유디 아니 잼비율라메 아니 네급 테스치기 민로라에 디준센 주는 나르기에 와이나 된다 패사로도 생원이지나 패사로야지 로 디기 어 딘디기 삼단신 간지 딘디기 삼단바이나 아니 나게 마기와 비 탱 타마송체네 로 심진신라야 아니 로버치 투야기 로치 레사리스.
So thinking of himself, Geshe says, just like everyone else, since down with that beginning, we have been conditioned to anger, attachment, and so forth through all the countless rebirths that we've already been through. We've been accustomed to the three poisonous afflictions, attachment, aversion, and ignorance, and through them we have been behaving badly. You can say that in some situation, like the worst or the least of living beings. So thinking about it, Geshe says that in this life, for example, he managed to study for 20 odd years under the guidance of excellent teachers, and he graduated as a Geshe. So then becoming proud about getting the title Geshe and thinking that he has achieved quite a lot, he says that actually you tend to forget about being accustomed to anger, attachment, and ignorance since down with that beginning and up until now, and how in all sorts of situations you have behaved quite badly. You just kind of become proud about a certain title that you get in this life, and this is really pitiable. So it's better then, in order to vanquish that sense of pride, to adopt the lower position and think that my role is to be of help to others.
Tere dinza ngone gi pigila ya chikta lo nyushu sumjila ya nangchu jangche ngone gi ta geshi chigin bayna ngeba tengi geshi chigin bayna ani mensa songche ni simjan tamji gi tenyo tawche ni ani rotuya di ta yungu yores ta di mena pigi ta chik töba chik bu chik tonin ro shabayna ta ngage kiya gi gyu sonji mato ani semla pya ro ninji da chamba kiyagi gyulaya dan rotugu mundo asra tadi matu waina da lo nyushi sumji dia chola yacha gyatam ta chola surach rendo asta pacha samda ta semla shagwi girmado ante te digi chugi digba chagi gyulan drowaina anta ta chochi mundo asra.
So then, having studied for 20 or 30 odd years and having graduated as a Geshe, when you think of the meaning of the word Geshe, a virtuous friend, if you stay true to this word as a virtuous friend, then you need to adopt the lower position and as much as you can to serve others. And if you don't do that, if you become proud on account of getting this title or the other, if you do not work for the benefit of others, if you do not serve others, it doesn't fulfill the title that you're being given. Not only that, it doesn't really help your mind in developing loving kindness, compassion, bodhicitta. It doesn't really help you in the development of those good qualities. And as such, you could say that you are wasting all the time that you have studied for 20 odd years in order to get this title. You can say that, yeah, indeed, maybe you place some imprints upon your mind stream, good imprints, but if you don't really adopt the lower position and think that my role then is to serve others, if you don't use that for the development of loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta, it is wasting all that you've studied before.
There's ding on some of the jayas da ra canang lochu nyushila ya nanjini jang yobana tigi goden to go dos canang pigi tawachin lo nyushu sumju chuchonga nga tu kardro yobana ti goden di semla pench canang zuma che yobana ti goden di semla pench kezi tigi susu ngarge de mates chik chong droyala ya pendo chong mebana teni da pendo majong wares ra o dinza di tula shani ani mensa songoya di ro mensa songoya na kyong rang roya ngoni tranik stamda na kyong raya che yosa maris kyong raya che meba masi kepsan rago das ro tar sangi komba di mensa son togu da
And similarly, when we look at our situation, we might have been involved with Buddhism for 10 or 20 years, studying and practice Buddhism. So we need to make sure that we make it purposeful, that we fulfill the purpose of doing it. We might have taken ordination. You might have been a monk for 10, 15, 20 years, or you might have been a nun for that long. But when you look at your mind and see whether it has actually benefited your mind, if it has helped your mind, if you find that you haven't really used this material in order to develop those states of mind, loving kindness and compassion and so forth, if you haven't allowed that to affect your mind, then you got no benefit from that. So where you adopt the lower position and you then think that I am of service to others, I am a servant to others, not only this position will not damage you, it is not a faulty position, it can only benefit you. And also through that, you will accomplish the state of Buddhahood.
어디를 대자다 간주 간지 면사 송고야 돼. 그러 면사 송마도 이야기 아니 규디 나르게 임바다 세우슈렌도 또 시디 당한도 원이 태바치미 취치 신인지 말나 겐 가르쳐 봐야냐 줄을 규트에지 배는 당한주 미망 제기 미 같은 걸 써야지. 그러 야 신나슈 잼선슈 제대야디 랑진진 써야디 슈치테왕기 임바디 자시카다 버렌도스 그러 계란의 미직 라우리 계란의 미직 라우도 계란 미 배주 치기도 세어서 즉 샘단 예부 저보들이 라윙도 왔을 때 된다 엄마디 아니 전주나노라야 아니 생기 체도 배다 신다 삼바다고 있는 결과는 교쇼 치슬랍시 생기 배주 가리어 봐나 배주 땅으로 치슬랍시 뭐는 게야진도 왔으라 딩고다다 오늘 전 딩고다 왔으라 다 저번 남다 지인바나 비 미카 땅이 총바나 디기 또기 랑기 나르겔이야 펜바시 로 미기 견주 치온디 나르겔이야 단다 뭐마디 나르겔이야 네바시 용사로 왔으라 메라타니 총 로자야 두그 로자야다 때라타니 코 야르 로자 가키요 말고 데스치글 데고라스로
And if we adopt the lower position, we then create an opposition to our own pride. So when we practice the Buddha Dhamma, whatever condition we encounter, we need to turn it to Dhamma practice. Whatever condition we encounter, even when we're criticized, when someone else is pointing out our faults, and often we are afraid, we're scared to be criticized. We are quite scared of what other people will say or think about us. Sometimes we get, in a conversation with others, we are being told that, if you do such and such, or if we say such and such, that person will say that thing about you, and the other person will think that about you, which means that we are controlled by a self-cherishing attitude. So thinking of the prayers that we sometimes make for the sake of others, we wish, for example, may I become a bridge, may I become a boat ferrying people across the water and so forth. So if you take such aspiration prayers to heart when you want to develop the wish to be of benefit to others, then you will adopt such lower positions, serving others, even as far as just being a bridge or being a boat for the sake of others. So if we practice Dhamma purely, whenever we're being criticized, we will turn that as something that will harm our own sense of pride. We will be able to use it in order to reduce a sense of pride. So whenever we are being criticized or whenever we are being praised, we should just remain as we are.
단된 진기랑신도 삼대 tö버서 용대 총세 점기권이 또버 차원냠나 로버기 용대 차시 점기장 무더버 찬성 간라민인 디 용대 찐이장 간상 계자 미시버 대달 상와 기식 버데 장기 용대 무더버 삼바워스.
Now the commentary to this section says, I shall order myself to achieve every purpose of sentient beings without pride, like the lowest of servants that is ordered to carry the greatest of burdens. Think of yourself as being in the nature of having faults, and if the thought arises to praise oneself for at least some small partial qualities of listening and so forth, think, just as nobody can see the qualities of the Bodhisattvas they look at, I shall not praise even a partial adventitious quality. I shall not proclaim my qualities.
bena daran res bena namgyu nganzu tachik chasagalaya pigi shungeng neden deson lama gibi shingi ani chik ngoni ge pigi lobjon yengen to so ngi chik chuk shingi yosedi ro am pe lamgen pe kombures ro takashiga jongsi mamang chege chik shingi mebi namba shtemado shingi yosengi di pe kombures ta di dus tachunjuna sujarondi ti nyamne redos ro ti nyamne rangi ngargir gi nimbo tench drugdos.
And then looking at how this attitude is embodied, for example, in those elders at such monastic institution that Geshe came from, big monastery and so forth. So the lamas, the virtuous friends and so forth, most of them, when facing a certain situation, they wouldn't say that I've studied this material and therefore I know it. It is rare to find someone that proclaims that I know this topic or I understand this topic. Most of them adopt the position that they still don't understand certain positions. So in such a way, they carry out a humble approach.
제 nganzu bigi 지 labje na xiaondi ani demba ma yu tongje sech ngoni demba imba ya demba di jending gelong gi ta di ani kapkala ya di xia ba ya ani nyeba ye de ba kansna ngargir ki gyula ya roya da an ji xian la ya tongzhong ji gyula so ba song ba na di cewi gi ta ani cewi gi 가서 다 남규 최고라서 된자 아니 제된 결혼지기 세빈 남규 때야디 싸우는 지기요 말았어. 이제 동시에 최고라서.
So then when you think about it, if someone that has studied so much says that, I don't know, I'm not someone that has great knowledge, we might consider such words to be untrue. And then particularly when you think about it in relation to monastics, speaking words which are untrue, well, rather than thinking that these monastics, these fully ordained monks are now speaking things that are untrue, you can think about it as adopting this position is someone that is helping even those monastics to bring down the pride. If one becomes proud and one looks down on others, you can say that for a monastic, that is a harmful behavior that is detrimental to others. And therefore, altogether, you cannot adopt a position that even after having studied for such a long, when you say that, I don't know, I don't understand, you cannot adopt the position that someone like that is lying. It is still in line with the prescriptive training of a monastic to vanquish their pride, to reduce an attitude of looking down on others, which are harmful attitudes.
다스ум바 저외 냠슬렘비 술디디 템바니스 dorna dagi töngicher kögishanla nöcheka nöde simjen töngishe danyalanın beber kis
And that brings us to the next point in verse 165. It comes out of the heading of sorry, we have two verses, 165 and 66, a presentation of the way to practice application in brief. Let's begin with verse 165 that says, like, sorry? All right, so I'm just going to repeat the question for the people at home. So you're saying that in relation to the point that Geshe has made now, so when teachers are saying that I don't know, I don't understand, and so forth, it still to you seems to be like a white lie in the sense that they've studied so much and they sense that obviously they understand this point. So it seems that they are being humble, as Geshe said, but it also seems to be a white lie. So could you say that they're willing to take upon themselves the suffering that could be caused by a white lie because they're benefiting and adopting the disposition is greater, let's say, than the suffering of the white lie. Dila chesan kerang khersumbanan the gewashin tenso lo mambochi la lobjun chenaya shingi mes den lagerwa nyamchun den de chigirwa. Chesan data la sanatawaina koransana yan den de lana yan this gangson den de chunjun jin lochi chagiresa. 인지게돌라 된데 강준 카르보된 라게와 자 강준 카보세야 돼 강준 춘춘치라 라게요 세상 데돌라 사원타와나 데 미덴바 셔와이나 강준 된데 셔와이나 할람딜라 킨탄 연텐 니가 요스레사 타데 강준 셔와이나 딜라테네 타페시 디파산네 둥에 춘춘치 용게로와 이네 펜토 둥에레 차요 찬 소소소소 Dunga tanto lene pento chache do then the chigi your sen lavna digerbes samlotana digerbes.
Kyagzun yingi mares ra. Kyagzun sadi, jun sadi, kolongji koda tapi jun sadi manche jun le ya kolongji koda ra. Kolong pigi kachi gogor tayak surchiki. Ah. Dio mares kansana 다 미시 세디 야코 피게 산지 점데 디 까고래 덴버트 송요레 까고래 덴버트 마르 송요레 디 깍즈 마르스티 디 깍즈르스는 디마다 아 라
Well, Geshe reckons that it's not really suitable to call it a white lie, because to call it like a white lie in the sense that this is the term itself, white lie, is something that we use in English, but in Tibetan it sounds quite weird, kind of to call it a lie. So no, kind of we say it in English and we know what we mean when we say white lie, but kind of when you translate it into Tibetan and wonder, actually, does this constitute a lie? As a white lie? Well, Geshe says that not really, because first of all, you have to think about the motivation. With the motivation in telling a lie is to deceive someone. So then, is there really a motivation here that is seeking to deceive another person? Particularly when you look at, for example, the teachings of the Buddha. In relation to some audience, the Buddha said that things exist truly. In relation to others, the Buddha said that things do not exist truly. So then when you consider those statements, for some saying things exist truly, for some he said things do not exist truly, doesn't mean to say that the Buddha lied to others. Like, you could also say, did the Buddha tell white lies for the sake of others? We can't really call those teachings lies or fabrications. So we have to look at it from a different perspective.
야구 신고였어. 계집티바나. 이 신고 메시지로다. 이 야구 신고 말다. 테스트 신고를 야구 신고 메시지. 안처럼 테스트 신고 도스라는 테스트 신고다. 이게 야구 신고 메시지 랭자바는 디 갸준 책 말했어. 근데 딘디 로즈르다. 디 따우르다.
So for example, if someone asks Geshe, do you know scriptures well? Geshe will say no. Do you know it? Do you have some knowledge? Do you know it a little bit? Well, Geshe will say yes. He studies some scriptures, but it doesn't think that he knows scriptures well. So Geshe feels that if such a conversation is being held, and this is the way that Geshe will respond, Geshe doesn't feel that it is a lie.
싱금에서 라바이나 디기 파쇼몬 고코레 파쇼몬 뇌샤야지 차탐장이야 말했어. 디기 슈글이야 안지 소수게 나르겔이야 뇌야지 간지 디 타치드 아니 펜바차야지 때 연구도 왔어라.
So then when you think about it, knowledge and understanding have different levels. There are coarse levels and subtle levels. So if you don't have the best understanding, then you can still think that I haven't got it or I haven't understood that. And in that sense, it harms your sense of pride. and therefore it is beneficial to you. Well, I guess it needs to be tested. Yeah, so I'm just going to repeat it for the people at home. So Carrie is saying that it's just like saying that I can make chocolate cake, but I cannot make the best chocolate cake. It needs to be proven. So is it fair to say that we're adopting the lower position or humble attitude in saying that I'm still training, I'm still studying, rather than developing kind of that attitude? What do you say at the end? Yeah, a prideful attitude is as if you've already mastered it. Chezan kabdilang also membecho tantule di nyamjin chewaina. 아니 소소소 삼로 카르탄 거래서는 nga tando yan lob진 chegies 전다 chegies 아니 ngage chewaina 아니 lob진 che sain 아니 tsama shin sain incident
디소를 차그라서라 디치보다 말다 디소를 차그래서라
yeah, it's kind of it's similar to that. This is similar to the attitude that we need to adopt.
조디 아니 지비 념촌 체디 랑기 경원진 체토바나 랑신기 더 념촌 체지 이지민 디 빠슈미야 딘리케 마르다스 셈슈 차고야 딘리 견둥 원진 체니 견도 도토고 톨이야 아니 롭존 체바이나 다 디르스 고야 디르스라 딘리 체바이나 다 아니 펜바지마도 네버 용 마레스.
The point is that if you become humble, you have the ability to recognize your own shortcomings. And when you have the ability to recognize your own faults and own shortcomings, you have an opportunity to make amendments, to correct them, to improve yourself. So when you recognize your shortcomings and your faults, it's not about becoming discouraged or becoming depressed about how lowly you are. It's rather that if you become proud, you cannot really see your own shortcomings. Whereas if you don't adopt a humble position, and then you can see your faults, you have an opportunity to make amendments and improve.
Lobzon chedan la mambu yongda bena lobzon richigi lobzon di meshen la yan jendurk tone shen li kebat pawa chego samni lobzon chedi ngargi kibi gyole yan drogra wastara ta te mayin ba susu gi pigi bena ta lobzon mambu che yanza bena susu gygi ani sösam gndang me ba tongchini ani sösam la ya lobzon che 아니 인지가 삼백은 당금해봐티 통치니 견 통치니 인지가 로래야 로종치 셰럽은 당금해봐 통 셰럽이야 로종치와나 되게 란시 이깔에 팽글마도 누구 말했어 두신 로바나 맨서 손투그리 아니 야기로 투그리스로.
There are different attitudes that you can apply to studying and training. Like, for example, you might think that I need to study and train because I want to compete with others and outdo others. I want to become better than others. And as such, you can say that you study something and you might become well versed in it, but it will also make you proud. Whereas here, when we think of studying and training, we then think that I haven't trained well in forbearance or in patience. So this is what I need to study. This is what I need to train it. I haven't trained well in developing compassion. So this is the training that I will undertake. I haven't developed my wisdom to an adequate level. So this is what I will train it, the development of wisdom, which means that this attitude that we bring into studying is going to make studying be of benefit to myself, but also to be of benefit to others.
네, 다시 좀 저희 냠슬렘 수도 때문에 록사임바. Okay, yeah.
So just to read through verse 165, it says, in brief, may the harm that you have caused to others for my sake descend upon me myself for the sake of sentient beings.
들다 간지 dorna세디 라 केव थोम मेबानी दादा फारदो 아니 lun가 있음기 네바 여츠 주소르직 아니 지 시안래야 너츠치야 바시래야 당샤버디 추카견다 안디 아니 심전 탐지기 체도 아니 랑기 띵도다 아니 추 렌트웨식 베바치고레스 용어 쇼세요조르식 딘디스 samdango 그래서
In short, what we think of in relation to this verse is all the harm that I've inflicted upon others since down without beginning and up until now, for the sake of accomplish my own goal. I'm now gonna exchange my position and wish for all the suffering of others to befall down upon me.
대회는 너나 통만 매번에 다디 다기 된지 체도 이 교지 지안라 네버 진이 제바 강인비 네버테 심진기 된르바 니지체 다니엘라는 베바 기시 냠 사모스.
In short, the commentary says, mine, whatever harm you have inflicted on sentient beings since beginning the time for my purpose, may that harm fall upon me in order to accomplish the purpose of sentient beings.
데닝년단 줄sur타 시기에 받는 메자디 박마사비 수진도 무엇을 지단 담디샤스.
And the next verse, 166, reads, I should not be aggressive, acting in a brutal way. Instead, like a newly married bride, I should stay bashful, timid, and restrained. There's a lesson to be learned here, I reckon.
You long kebata, you long keba yiresra, you long keba pen jagada, cup to do the jagada, putavina, and a pamasava deep, and a whatsa yum chinja shooting digros. Then no show what in a pamasava hambashu yiras.
Of course, Geshe says that it is, you need to read it in a cultural context, you know, so when you think of getting married in Indian society or Tibetan society, when a bride kind of arrives in a new household, the type of behavior that she adopts is being very timid and bashful and so forth. Geshe reckons that probably here we would do the other kind of the opposite, kind of rather than being timid and so forth, we will display self-confidence and also courage, or kind of being a little bit bashful.
Yeah, sir.
Michelle? So you're wondering if kind of it's not only a difference between Buddhist and Buddhist approach and non-Buddhist approach, but it seems that also there is a cultural difference here where it might be that in Asian tradition, the kind of the culture is to be more humble, whereas here, if someone does minimize their knowledge or say that they do not understand well, or in that sense that they don't know well, we will take that to be false humility. Halamdilaten kabdila number chun yamchun chego gres lagerwa. Nendian shachugi luksu dan nuchu yaman chigi gi luksu de la keva kus tewaina peshir shacho la den de yamchun chewaina yawo retsigi yores. Dira den yamchun dagan chewaina ngashingi mare sindodo chewaina. Then the nyamchun indodo chea den de chik misam giresa. Then the chik kewa yon segirbes.
Yon chogros, la kazana cochinju kone pigilea, chi mitsalon chonda, labja gavtan, tony cabadrogodos, ra lombakashilea, chinju kone susu poba chegodan, mikilea, danyamchin drogodan, labjata chinju kone labja gawandi, media chimbuchawana, ko tagaranshingi, susu poba kinta, then drogos, ra kashilea. 저는 염소 제거랬어. 이게 샹라야 구지 치고 그랬어. 겜발야 구십 치고 그랬어. 샹발야 장종 치고 그랬어. 백신중 건 일랍시 개원디 미디어 첨부 자원디야 그디 공시직 땐데 용거 왔어. 로 딘디 켜봐.
Yeah, Geshe reckons that that cultural conditioning also plays a role in that. Like, for example, it might be that in our cultural setup from young age, in our upbringing, we are conditioned to be more self-confident, kind of to have kind of more courage or more self-confident, to see ourselves always as equal or on par with others. So if we are conditioned to that attitude from young age in our education system or upbringing or whatever, then it is likely that we'll have more of that attitude. Whereas if you grow up in a culture in which from young age you're encouraged to be humble, to be gentle and respectful to all the elderly, and also to help as much as possible, to be of help to kind of those who are younger than you in adopting a humble position, then yeah, you will affected by your upbringing and cultural conditioning. So that also plays a role.
젠기 동을 코 무슨 또 냠나 찬섬 랑기 이드니 냐타티 토거드 아니 펑컴 채버기 수도 시지 시에게버니 메차티 원아 제들 내바 자세나 파마사비 안술신도 못사와다 젠기 맨도비 지그바나 졸롬 담디 샤버차오스 temen losak tu konda nyenran la renchi gin gyurli ani sup gyutsu de shin jongo sa.
In reading a commentary to verse 166, again, it says, one should not make it aggressive and wrathful, but bashful, shy and controlled like a young bride. So it says, one may think, I cannot carry the burden of others' suffering. The answer says the Bodhisattva should not make the mind aggressive and wrathful, but bashful, shy, and controlled like a young bride. How should the mind abide? Like a new bride, it should be bashful, afraid of the criticism of others and of controlled behavior. In a great commentary, it is translated as wrath. Yeah, the aggressive is, yeah, the word aggressive is translated as wrath.
Niba dagjin jene jorwe nyams lembitse sem on the chavala she gobak do neba tsarji bit surda random bashik la jorwe nyemita lugi nyebala tagbata sem on the chawo tambu gobak do neba tsarji bit surne techa tedar ne chashi tedar kyogi mechawa tedar dena onjeti telin dena tsarji chas.
Now let's look at point B that comes at the heading of when practicing the application of exchanging self and others, one should exert control over one's mind. Now in verses 167, 168, sorry, the first of all, 4 point to that section. Let's read through that first off. The way to annihilate brazenness, then the disadvantages of sticking solely to one's own benefit, examining the faults of the body is the third point, and finally exerting control over the mind. Now, when we begin with the way to annihilate brazenness, verse 167 says, sorry? Thus, you should think and abide in this way and not act so. If you transgress being under control, you will be subjugated.
jorwejan tedar neba chala ani tan durwa shendu gewala kodurwa chaw sem gewala kodurwa chaw tedar sem kyogi shendu ma chawa tedar dona sem den temba da shijin ki on chedi ani nimbu telindena temba da shijin ki ta le devaina tema tagdu bigi ani charjeba chashi durwa chawos
The commentary says one should think about the benefit of others and abide with one's actions accordingly. Like taming a horse, make yourself suitable to practice virtue. Mind, if you do not desire to act in this way, then I shall take control of you with mindfulness and introspection, both being an antidote. If the mind transgresses these antidotes of mindfulness and introspection, then put a stop to it and subdue the mind.
When the tether dam yanni, semku tether mechena, kyola nebo kun tembi kyunyi sarji chawase.
We continue with verse 168 that reads, however, although having been advised, if mind, you do not act in such a manner, then since all faults will base themselves in you, you will only be destined to subjugation.
When the rangi ranla tether dam yang, ne, the nyumu shuchi wangi, nyumu ji on to kyola, nye tani, semku tether mechenas. Da jinzinki sem kyola chishir nebo kun tembi na, sem kyo nye sarjebar chawa setos.
Now the commentary says, mind, if despite advising yourself in this manner, you do not act accordingly because you find you are under the control of the afflictions and the affliction can be strong, you need to put a definite stop to it because the self-cherishing mind becomes the basis upon which all present and future faults rely upon.
Terda kanji da jinzingi, ran jinzingi, nyeba di, nyeba sam, nyeba tong tubayna, ani sarje tugres, sarje gres,
Which means that if you pile all those faults upon a self-cherishing attitude, you will be able to subjugate the mind.
Tere ranjinzi be ranjinzi according to tanda gain lamramba. Shungenjo tanda kong gombo zosari ne kong ane ngabchungagu kawliya ngabchungagu kong ne pe drebong geshi chikreshara geshi ta geshi kera chambo ta ngabchunga kong pigila ya la ya supe tumunda ane chizu kong pigila shu ta penitsu chik chakbe ane kechambo da tendi ta jawar chila kan goya jorwa ta sama kong tsutana an tusnanda ta pigi ane chasala ya shugula pe anda kong tso nanchi shu ane jawar chik kawkola ya kong la kandi nangandu ane chik densi gishi chaga tendi ge ane toba tendi ya kong la pa chari na ane kong tsu lendeb nansha yu chik ngin dangwanda je songsi dangwanda ngin je sora dina ranjin zing kort chik songsi
Jason's
ngin jes ngin tongsu
Jes. Jason the Casa Genlan Rimpagar in Bachela Page Chapel in Tansonse, the Penny Gala, any Cabral than the Chua than the Yana the Igitone, Amana the Pelama.
And Gishi Shamba dindi con la Chivananchi. Chivan you subgin do Pelava Tansa. Digi Chilin Sutansa. Tonsara. But Dina Ranchins in Korch Tindo.
So there was this famous geshe called Genlam Rinpa, who spoke about a self-cherishing or the way to antidote a self-cherishing attitude. He already passed away, but he was one of those older geshes that remained in Tibet after 1959. So in 1959, after the Tibetan uprising, many Tibetans made their way following His Holiness the Dalai Lama to exile. And Genlam Rinpa didn't get to go, he didn't make it, so he stayed back in Tibet. It was a geshe from Drepung Monastery, and it was quite famous. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, having went into exile, relied upon him every once in a while. So he sent His Holiness the Dalai Lama some texts from Tibet to India. Then His Holiness at some point composed a letter with 20 Nisangai. with 28 questions or 28 points that he wanted to clarify. So he sent it to Genlam Rinpa, and Genlam Rinpa also consulted other Geshes that were still around at the time in Tibet, and then sent those answers back to India to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So one of those questions was about a self-cherishing attitude.
Ranjinzin di karesi tion di kongi ranjinzin da ranla chakbi chakbani bodi tenji migi namran res ani tenji res dan kanji tenji res tene ona nyara daju vijula ranjinzi yomares lagina leg burn detes zawni ne yomares and semanam ding long tedi beji dang mare odushin kanji dodo disons right.
So Geshe brings it up now, I reckon, because of the points that we've discussing in the last few days. This point with respect to self-cherishing attitude was, Genlam Rinpa says that a self-cherishing attitude is synonymous with having attachment to oneself. And when you say that it is synonymous with having attachment to oneself, it just says that you might use different terms, self-cherishing or attachment to oneself, but the meaning is the same meaning, which means that taking the position that here is in order to realize that arhats do not have a self-cherishing mind in the mainstream is a good position. Magic Tiostandoa. 그런 야림부터 신바치 착대치 다도 딜라 카르스니오레스나 단지 마릭바탄 란친진 균제 마인스 데네 순샤
균제 말봐 오케이
제가
겨울음식 때문에
다들 지게 안에 직티도와 다들 딜라 착대디 야림부터 아니디 배셔디 야면 텔디 냠도 되는 제샤 있는 나란사나 배시 그런 탭디 야림부터 순추 시샤네 된데 제네 아니 그게 있잖기 민데는 니데는 셴나 디게르 베스 배셔데는 잉게레 하고 마서 네 야림부터 문에디 티오나 하고 마서
어레데 더 겨울음식 송주 망부 더 쉬어라스라 대치단 인기리스 다 가리는 인초가 다 가리는 용초가 다 배나 아니 산지 좀 된 뒤에 아니 진주 속에 산지 좀 된 뒤에 강송바디 고당 망부 휴식 고연도 하다 대난신기 겨울음식 송에 대한 수수수기 고당의 용초가라스
제가 그런 란친진 단단진 균데 마인스는 소임바
이게 균데 마인스
제가 다원한신 단진 마릭파탄 차단디 균데 이마인
차바티 균데레 예선레 이나 갱이들이 손스 베기 겨울음식이 난진 행기디 란진진 소리스 송거다
난진 하이케 란친진 소리
다디 참비게 아니 착바데다 랑라 착비 착발로 소버 디다 아니 란친진 콘스 로그레스 다 갑콜레로 아니 착비 온큐비 당즈 댄지 되고요레 양카시기 딘 되고 말 먼저 게르무치기 고마랍스 시자치니 아니 댄지 온큐비 착바요레스 딘리송거 다도 14부 가서다 롤린치야로 저랬더니
제가 계시 단지 마리파탄 차바 균데 드네 채워이나
균데 제는 당진디 규샤거라다
제 이네 단진탄 란친진 균제 마인바기 균선 카레스나디 란친진 다디 단진 생켄데 시샤네
당진내지 거라 란진지임시
All right, so I used that opportunity to ask Geshe a question that Alan sent me yesterday to ask Geshe. He said that he's been reading a book that was put together both by Thupten Chodron and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And in that book, it is said that the position that is presented in that book is different to the position that Geshe presented in the last few days. So it says that in that book that cherishing oneself is not an affliction, and it is not one of the two obscurations and so forth. Anyway, so the position in that book is different, but also one of the things that came up this book is a point with respect to the connection between self-cherishing and self-grasping. So in that book, it is said that self-cherishing or self-grasping and self-cherishing are not in a cause and effect relationship. So I asked Geshe if he agrees, and Geshe said that yes, he agrees. So I continued and said that if you say that self-grasping and self-cherishing are not in a cause and effect relationship, what about self-grasping and attachment or anger? Are there in a cause and effect relationship? Geshe said that yes, you can say that they are in a cause and effect relationship. So the question is, what then is the difference? If you say that self-cherishing is an affliction, and anger and attachment are also afflictions, what is the difference between ignorance of grasping at a self and self-cherishing not being in a cause and effect relationship, whereas anger and attachment are in a cause and effect relationships? Well, Geshe said that in continuing with the position of Genlam Rinpa, he also said that when you look at the innate grasping at a self, you can say that the innate grasping at a self primarily is a self-cherishing attitude. And on that basis, then you have anger and attachment that arise that come under the domain or under the banner of this principle self-cherishing that is an innate grasping at the self. So this is actually a point that comes up in some scriptures. Like, for example, there's discussion about attachment. Do you say that attachment is in the entity of grasping at self, or is it not in the entity of grasping at the self? Actually, when you investigate that point in line with what Lama Tsongkhapa says in the illumination of the thought, according to Geshe's teacher, Garinpoche, you have to say that there is an attachment that is in the nature of self-grasping, ignorance of grasping a true existence.
Gengi gomarabsa tsik shizong tangi tsik chimachima gomarabsa tsik shizong chin da chijen pape en zinchine en songres tejidi en jeromuchi ta gomarabsa namala ya chagbi ngonkui en denzi shayores tejidi ta ranchin zinti pigi nganjin ti ro nganjin di ranchin zi en nganjin ngonkui chagba dia ranchin zi kanji du sama shachagodos leina yam tsambadojile ya 먼저 란진진디 동아탐지 고 니버군주 고레스 란진진베 이 꿰ን따 고레스 베 아니 따지 로종 람름 참만나라야 여 대바치라야 란진진 코랑기 옹 가리임바디 데스 마세교로식 라 딘저 차드샤스
So Geshe's teacher had the words of Lama Tsongkhapa's illumination of the thought clear in his mind. Kind of, he took the literal meaning of what Lama Tsongkhapa is saying in his illumination of the thought, where he spoke about the existence of attachment, which is in the nature or the entity of grasping a true existence. So here we're looking at a position which says that there is the primary self-cherishing attitude is an innate grasping at the self, or let's say it from the other direction. The innate grasping at the self is primarily self-cherishing attitudes, and therefore when we think of one of those really amazing points that come up in certain teachings like the Lamrim teachings and so forth, we refer to self-cherishing as being the gateway to all torments, to all problems. And from the Mahayana perspective, we need to see a self-cherishing attitude as being faulty. What is interesting about that, what is astonishing about that, although so many scriptures, Mahayana scriptures, speak about the drawbacks of a self-cherishing attitude, still they're not highlighting in a very clear way what the nature is of a self-cherishing mind. So there is a great discussion about how folly it is, but being able to pin it down in a very clear way and say that this is what it is not something that is found in those great scriptures.
Taniba random bashila jovi nyemigla sum nyemig samne random bashi drupa thorwatan jendon la jorwatan dudi tembo tangbo nyemig samne random bashi drupa thorwani kyoji ko kalapi hunji tude sheninde ngenton ta kyo kandun ro kyoji treba kunchumsha tadon dala rangi tuen yonyam samba te torchiks.
Let's look at the next section in the text, first of all, through the outline and then the root text. So we're going to look at, the disadvantages of sticking solely to one's own benefit. There are 3 points to that section, beginning with ceasing to act solely for one's own benefit by reflecting on the disadvantages, then applying oneself to the welfare of others, and finally a presentation in brief. Now let's begin with the next 6 lines, beginning with verse 169. So it says, the previous time when you could overcome me is different. I see it, and now whenever you go, I shall destroy all your arrogance. Even now may I cast aside the intention thinking about my own welfare.
Dan dajin malose dajin zin kyoji ko karlabi nibo kunji tsawa mashibi hunji tute nibi tsawa mashibi tujen res. Nibi tsawa ngi kyo ngin tong kyo niba kebala ta kandun ro zhong meba dajin zin kyoji treba kun tsawa ni shombar chawos. Tadong zo dala rangi tuen bashi dribi onyo nyamdo sembati torchik. The
time when I did not see that you, my self-cherishing, are the root of my problems, and when you destroyed me is past and another time. It was when I did not understand this. Now I see you as the root of all faults. You will be powerless in generating faults, as I shall destroy your arrogance wherever you go. If there is the thought, I still have the power to achieve only my own purpose, I shall destroy and completely eradicate that thought. Shall we leave the text here for today? So we leave the text here for now, and we're going to take a few weeks break from this module as we have other things that are planned for the program, including Jungness and such, DB, Rubina, and all other wonderful things. So Geshe is hoping that in between now and when we resume the study of Shantideva's text, may everything works well for you guys.
Thank you.
Gewadi nyududa lama sangye drugyune drowa chikyama lupa de salago parasho chanchu sancho rinpoche maje panon ge gyurji keba nyamba mepaya gone gondo pewa sho kanri rawe kowe shinkan pendan dewa malu chuwene chenre siwan tensin gyatso shape site pardu tengyuchi Tu Tsu Chan Shin Jang Gung Gya Wei Tenzin kyong pe we kun zo do po ze. Cho sun ko we le mun tu du pa da so du je kon du sha ten sho.